I am Dr. Diandra Poe, more affectionately known as Dr. D. And this is your portion of me talking to you about Glass Soldier. And if you listen to my show, the first show with me introducing myself, thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. If this is your first introduction to me, let me tell you briefly who I am and what Glass Soldier is. I am an Army veteran and survivor of military sexual trauma. I was medically retired in 2016 from the Army, and from there started my journey and on this advocacy space of advocating for military service members around sexual violence, domestic violence, um, and really just all the nuances that come with having served and navigating that space. My nonprofit is centered around helping those in and out of uniform. And so here we are in the month of September, and I want to highlight Suicide Awareness Month. So, in the background, I don't know if anyone's going to be able to hear it or not because this is real life, right? I live on a military base, and so Reveille or Retreat is playing right now in the background. So, as the day comes down to an end, I want, and we start the month of September off. As I said, I want to focus on Suicide Awareness Month. September brings about a lot of awareness, and we have been doing a really good job talking about suicide, and it is a very uncomfortable subject to talk about. In the Army, they have what they call ACE training, ACE SI training, which stands for Ask, Care, Escort, Suicide Intervention, right? Um, and we're calling it intervention because we really need people to have the conversation. And so, my goal with you for the next 20 minutes or so is to kind of paint a picture for you about my own personal journey with suicide, ideations, and attempts. So, before I begin, I do want to offer a trigger warning. And I know that um, if you've paid attention to social media, normally trigger warnings come prior to the conversation. I am going to be talking about suicide. I'm going to be giving statistics about it um, and even describing my own journey. So I will say, for those of you who may or have previously been triggered by conversations like this is your opportunity um, to pause, maybe come back when you feel ready, or with someone that you care about who can be there for you. And for those of you that continue on this journey with me, please take an opportunity to take care for yourself after this episode and reach out and talk to someone. With that being said, the first time that I attempted to take my life, I was a teenager. I am what some people in this advocacy space would call a 3-time survivor. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, of domestic violence, and military sexual trauma. When I was younger, growing up in the 80s, there were zero conversations about suicide. About just as much as there were zero conversations about mental health. And if someone struggled with feeling sad or the sadness that took over their lives, it was brushed off or we prayed our way through it. As I was trying to navigate now a couple of years of having been sexually abused, I attempted to take my life with Tylenol. It was the only thing that was available to me. And in my very young, when I say teenage, I mean preteen mind, I thought for sure I would die if I just took half a bottle of Tylenol. What I wound up with was an incredibly bad stomach ache and having to confess to my father, who was home at the time, what I had done. My father took me to the hospital, um, and they took me back into a room. I remember them like giving me an IV, and my dad was in the room with me as they were trying to find my vein. And I think this was the first time that I had ever gotten an IV. So I didn't know what to expect. And so the guy looks at me and he says, "Think of a song to sing." So I looked at my dad, and at the time, the only thing that I could think of was Jingle Bells. So I started singing Jingle Bells. And I say that so that you could understand where I was as a child. That the only song that could come to my mind wasn't what was popular on the radio, um, was Jingle Bells. And as I'm singing the song and this man is puncturing my arm to put an IV in me, my father made this like awkward smile towards me because of the song that I chose to sing. And I don't know in that moment what my father was thinking, but I was just grateful that he looked at me. And so over the next couple hours, I was being checked for all of my organs. And I can tell you right now, I don't remember what they were checking for. As an adult, we tend to fill in the gaps of missing information, especially when it relates to trauma. So, as an adult, when someone takes too much Tylenol, we know what Tylenol does now. I could say that they were probably checking to make sure that my liver was okay. Or, did they need to pump my stomach? They did not at that time. And so, spending a few hours there, I don't remember where my mother was or why she wasn't the one there with me. The doctors never asked me why. My father never asked me why. But I remember thinking to myself, if you just ask me, I'll tell you. Because I didn't have the language to understand what has been happening to me and what was happening to me. And neither did my parents. I'm grateful that my father is alive today and he's 92. Amazing man. And I have a daddy's dad, right? I never blame my parents for not understanding, having the tools or the resources, right? In the grand scheme of things, we know what wrong is. And in that moment, I was looking for my father to give me a way out, to just open the door so I can tell him so that it could stop. But he didn't, and neither did the doctors. And so I found myself trying to figure out a different way to cope with what would continue to happen for a few more years. Fast forward, I am a young wife of a soldier. My first marriage was riddled with domestic violence. And we'll get into that later, right? Of how statistically domestic violence shows up. I know a lot of people in my life are like, you had two loving parents who I never saw um, be violent toward each other. How did I end up in and staying in a marriage for almost 10 years with someone who would abuse me over and over again? We'll talk about that next month in October for domestic violence awareness. So you'll have to come back. But I found myself trying to navigate being a young wife and mother while also hiding this abuse from my parents. And I learned to do that because of what happened to me as a child. I didn't want to tell my parents, and maybe in some way, I didn't think that they would be able to do something or they wanted to know themselves. Again, I say that my father is 92, born in 1932. My father came from a poor family of 12, and he himself has seen a lot. My mother also, bless her heart, my mother transitioned in 2021, I'm sorry, at the age of 80. Also, someone who has seen a lot. So when I think about my ability to come forward and ask for help, I think about the people that were in my life that's still in my life. I think about the language, the resources, the tools, the generational hurt, the generational pain that they endured. I think about what my parents has seen, especially my father, um, as a Black man who is a veteran as well, who went to war, who has seen people die, who has had to carry a lot of trauma, and not until recently, and I mean 2020, 21st century, even thought of therapy. To have to go through that as a 17-year-old young man off to Korea, asked to do some very adult things, come back to this country, have to fight through racism and Jim Crow and raising a family through a lot of things. There was just no way, and maybe in some way I knew that my parents didn't have the tools to help me, or maybe they did, and my strength lied in their resiliency. Um, and maybe that's just a testament of who I am today. I don't know. I humbly submit to you that I often don't know how I have come as far as I can, other than my faith um, being my primary reason. But I didn't tell them about the abuse. And then one day, um, I just didn't think there was any way out of the abuse. And I found myself at what is now called Fort Liberty, previously Fort Bragg, as a new spouse, no help, had no idea what the FRG was, which stands for Family Readiness Group. There was no 988, which I'll give you guys later. I was unaware of a hotline, therapy, or even his command to reach out and say, "Are you aware of what your soldier is doing at home?" And so while my children, two younger ones, were at daycare, I attempted to hang myself in our bedroom. We had a canopy bed at the time, made out of metal. Um, Pretty sure we got it from the PX, the exchange store. Um, for our listeners who are not military, the PX is just a store, post exchange. Service members are allowed to shop at. I remember it was cream colored. It was a full size bed. And I remember I had decorated it with white sheer curtains around it. And so I took my rope belt and tied it at the top of a canopy bed and wrapped it around my neck and was like, okay, I'm just going to stand here on the bed and go over to the side. Um, I'm 4'11", so I'm not very tall. And I thought this out, that he'll go pick up the children and he'll come home and the bedroom door will be shut and he'll come in, he'll find me, and he'll feel horrible. My failed attempt was that my robe belt did not stay tied. Um, and I sat there on the floor. And for some reason, I didn't want to try again. I think after feeling the pressure of the rope around my neck and it slipping, I thought that perhaps this is not my time to go. But what I did do was I got up enough courage to call my mom and tell her that I wanted to leave. And I did multiple times. I did go back because this was at the very beginning of my marriage. I went back a few times, and each time the abuse got worse. But still, in all, I never told my mother or my sister who drove down from my home state and came to pick me and the children up. I just told them that I couldn't take it anymore. I think my mother knew for sure, but she never asked. She never asked. And so those were the only 2 times in my life where I attempted to take my life. It would not be the last time that I had suicidal thoughts, ideations, or a plan. After I decided to yield to mentorship and go into the Army in 2000, started around 2008, toward the end of my marriage, I had a mentor who, well, let me back up for a second. I started involving myself in the FRG. Uh, I don't know what sparked it, but for some reason, after my time in Germany, being over there and the abuse getting worse, I found my niche in advocacy. The bug had bit me and blossomed into what I felt like. At least my dad always told me that I was a servant leader. And so after going from Germany, where it was really bad, to Arizona with my still abusive spouse, my mentor encouraged me to go into the Army. Again, not sure what he saw in me, um, but he saw something in me, and to affect change. And I know the people out there like, what in the world? The Department of Defense is a machine. Why would you think that you could go in there and affect change? Because hope is eternal to me. And as long as there's hope, there's a possibility, no matter what. So I went in at 31 years old, doe-eyed like I was 18, ready to be a lawyer. Ready to be a lawyer. That is not what I did in the Army. Uncle Sam said, we're going to branch you into logistics. You're going to manage beans and bullets and people. Well, that worked for a little while. And when I say a little while, first duty assignment, less than 90 days after arriving at my first duty assignment, I was assaulted in my home while my children slept nearby. So, a new set of trauma, a new survival instinct, a new test to my resiliency. That, again, is a whole nother episode. And we'll get back to that and all those details in another show. You are literally going to have to tune in every single month, or you're going to have to follow me on my social media to hear more. Fast forward to 2016. I was about to take on the title of Forever Soldier. And it was Thanksgiving week. I said, I'm going to kill her, and then I'm going to kill myself. That was not a good idea. I was sent to the emergency room where they restrained me. Things escalated, to say the least. They brought my command in, which made it worse. My husband, who could not find the words to help me. But what did happen, and I'm going to try to get through this without choking up because I feel the lump in my throat immediately, is a social worker came in and sat with me, and I told her my whole story. Not everything. We didn't go back to childhood or previous marriage. I told her everything that happened to me over the last 6 years while I was in uniform. And that woman said to me, listen, it's Thanksgiving week. I could send you upstairs to the 5th floor where you'll probably remain over the holiday. The lump is there. Or I could give you another opportunity because I don't believe that your story ends here. She gave me an opportunity, and I took it. Boy, did I take it. It took me a few days, a few weeks, as a matter of fact. And in December of that year in 2016, I enrolled in the social work program at the University of Texas in Arlington. And I said, I'm going to be a social worker because I'm going to do that. That woman saved my life simply because she asked. She asked and she listened. So I'm going to give you guys some glaring statistics because I want you to understand why it's so important for you to ask the question. Women veterans are twice as likely, right now, twice as likely to commit suicide against their male counterparts. That's what the DoD is reporting. Twice as likely to die by suicide. Forgive me for saying commit. And in 2021, 350 women died by suicide. The suicide rate among our women veterans has since skyrocketed. And is moving at an alarming rate past our male counterparts. And I want you to take that in consideration, that the military is still very male dominant. So here's my call to action to this audience when you think about women veterans. Ask them. Ask them, do they have a plan? Ask them what happened. Ask them, are they thinking about killing themselves? It will not make them want to complete suicide. It will not make them want to die by suicide. It is a hard conversation, and it is not for everyone. I will say, not a lot of people are going to want to ask, because if they say yes, then you have to be prepared. So I am encouraging listeners, if you have not yet, if you want to know how to be trained in mental health first aid, the Ask Care Escort, ask them, care about what's going on, and then get them to the services they need. I mentioned 988 earlier. 988 is a national hotline. Anyone can call. Veterans can press 1. You can even text now. You're having a conversation with someone that you love and you don't know what to do. You can text the 988 number. You can go online and talk to someone. Military One Source. For those that are still in and maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to someone in your chain of command. The last number I want to give you is the National Center for PTSD. And that's 1-800-273-8255. There are resources and there are people out there like myself and many, many others who want to know how to care for you, how they can help you. You are important. Your story is not finished. And you are loved and you are cared about. Your service mattered. You matter. I thank you all for listening today. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Time is a finite resource, one that I cannot give back to you. So when you spend it on me, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you guys next month.